Well, the driving force behind Hamas and other jihadist movements is radical Islam. But these Muslims don't just want to conquer the Middle East, they want to rule the world. John Waggy has that story.
Throughout much of the Muslim world, from Iran to Gaza, comes the cry, death to America, death to Israel. In Hamas-controlled Gaza, this goal is mandated by the teachings of the faith. To that end, the Hamas army has begun the largest military buildup in its history and is stepping up its cross-border attacks. With their constant attempts to provoke Israel, Hamas leaders hope to put themselves at the vanguard of the holy war, not just against Israel, but against the West as well. Hamas political leader Khalil Abu Layla says free speech in the West, like the publishing of cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, offends Muslims and produces a common cause.
Americans must know when the religious feelings of Muslims and Arabs are provoked, this will motivate Muslims to move closer to the people who are raising the flag of Islam.
Layla dreams of the day when Islam controls not only the Middle East, but every continent on earth, especially Europe and North America.
It is unfortunate today that governments of Europe and the United States are dealing with the Muslims and Arabs like a master and his slaves, and the Americans are bossing us around.
Muslim clerics often refer to Jews and Christians as the sons of monkeys and pigs, but for Hamas leaders such as Yunus al-Astal, it is Jews and Christians who are bigots.
It is in their nature. They believe they are the sons, the beloved people of God. And whoever is their enemy will be animals in the image of human beings, made to serve them as slaves. People who have this sick way of thinking about non-Jews, in their own mind, they believe that we Arabs and Muslims don't deserve to live.
Some people may look at the Hamas struggle as one for territory in Gaza and the West Bank. But these leaders have a much larger global goal built on centuries of resentment. John Waggy, CBN News at the Israel-Gaza border.
Thanks, John. Well, we have with us now an author and Middle East expert, Walid Fares. His latest book is called The Confrontation, Winning the War Against Future Jihad. And Dr. Fares, welcome back to the 700 Club. Thank
you very much for having me.
Listen, you made very clear in your book that the ruling powers in the West just don't get it. Is this just the jihadists, the Salafists, the various ones who are involved in the radical Islam, or is this a core teaching of Islam itself, jihad?
Well, Pat, the Salafists, the jihadists that you just mentioned, basically are trying to condition public opinion in the Muslim world and tell them that this is a core belief, that they have the duty to mobilize and to perform this jihad. Unfortunately, in the Muslim world, the forces that contend, that basically oppose this, are weak, and unfortunately we haven't been successful in supporting those moderates. And this is not the problem of governments only. Our academic elite in this country, which was funded for many, many years by Wahhabi funds, has been the one that did us a bad advice in the 80s and the 90s by telling us that jihad is just yoga, so don't worry about it. We lost about 20 years of not being able to act in time to help the moderates to defeat the jihadists, and we were not successful.
In history, way back, when they said jihad, that meant conquer North Africa, conquer Europe, conquer the Middle East. Somehow it's been morphed into a condition of the soul where it has to do with inner peace and so forth. Is there any validity in this current thinking, or is it just strictly propaganda?
No, actually, historically, Pat, it is well known that jihad was a concept used by the then caliphate, the Islamic Empire. 42 caliphs, 1,200 and more of the governors, the walis, have used jihad as a call for mobilization, for sending armies into the conquest of Syria, of Iraq, of North Africa, into Spain. These are historical facts. That was basically the norm for more than 1,000 years. But then in modern times, assuming that those modern Arab and Muslim countries have become members of the United Nations and the international community, that jihad cannot be valid now. But the jihadists of Al-Qaeda, the Salafists, the Khomeinis of Iran, Ahmadinejad, Hezbollah, all believe that that historic jihad must continue regardless of all what we have agreed on in international law.
Well, the concept of jihad comes right directly out of the writings of Muhammad. Is that not correct? It's in the Quran.
Well, jihad is in the Quran. Jihad is in a variety of texts. But one would argue that that has been the case in history, that in modern times, religious wars are not valid. But the jihadists argue otherwise. They say that all Muslims have to continue what has been the case for between the 7th century and the 20th century.
Well, your book was kind of a call for a wake-up. What is it you want to wake the governments of the West to?
Pat, it is very important, especially 7 years after 9/11, as we look at the battlefields in Afghanistan and Iraq, the strikes of the jihadists in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and elsewhere, that this is not just a collection of military confrontation on the ground in Iraq or in Afghanistan. This is a global jihad. This is a global confrontation. And first thing, this government in the United States, this White House, the next White Houses, this Congress and the next ones, it's very important for them to educate the American public, exactly as we're doing right now in this segment, because most Americans do not understand that this is not just an issue of foreign policy reaction. People are upset with reaction or economic disenfranchisement. This is an issue of an ideological movement which wants to bring down 21 Arab countries, 52 Muslim states, recreate the caliphate with all the resources that you can imagine, and then continue with that struggle against the West. So the American public has to be educated first, and that's the most important thing a U.S. government has to do.
Well, the government is very reluctant. You've got a president who says Islam is a religion of peace, and then he has Ramallah feasts in the White House for sometimes radical leaders. How are the American people going to find out?
Well, that has been the problem. This is why the 9/11 Commission in the summer of 2004 was asking the question, how come we were attacked, we didn't know? How come there were declarations of war in 1996 and 1998 and we didn't know? Well, our academic advisors didn't let us know, and the academic advisors come from the classroom, and the classroom in America has been impacted by the oil-producing regimes who have instilled a lot of money. So it's a systemic problem, and unfortunately now it's civil society, bottom-up approach. Bloggers, free TV shows, writers, this is how we're gonna give consciousness to the American public. Hopefully a future Congress and hopefully also future administrations will do a good job in making sure that Americans understand. But also there is another job, Pat, that is to distance ourselves from the oil-producing regimes and become energy independent. That is part of the next confrontation for the next 10 or 20 years.
You write about nuclear jihad, also urban jihad. What are you talking about?
Well, nuclear jihad means that now we have a Pakistan which has the nukes, but within Pakistan there is a very large force of jihadists which, if things goes bad, may seize those weapons in the next few years. And we have Iran, which even though as we are in Iraq and in Afghanistan and we have task forces in the Gulf, may develop very soon the nuclear capability. So these are two regimes at risk. If we do not win this war of ideas between now and the next 5 to 6 years, we may see 2 nuclear states, maybe 5 nuclear states in the next 10 years that are jihadists. With regard to the urban jihad, Pat, we have seen the pattern over the past 10 years that what those cells of Islamic radicals or jihadists in the West are trying to do is to create a force within each of Western cities, in France, in Great Britain, in Germany, and also in the United States and Canada, so that at some point in time, in the near future or medium future, they will be able to harm national security and economic security. There is a plan moving forward. We need to be very aware of that.
Has the West got the spiritual and moral fiber to resist this jihadist tendency?
See, the problem has been twofold. One is the so-called relativism, meaning there is no more a norm, a measurement. And I'm a professor in the classroom, and I see that among my colleagues in the elite, in the academic elite. There are no measures. How can you measure that, for example, jihadism is a threat? In the 90s, and I mentioned that earlier, our elite thought that, well, jihad is yoga. No, it wasn't yoga. It was basically an ideology of confrontation. But the other thing is that we have little information. We have been blocked from getting a good education on this issue, and this is where the problem is today.
Well, I appreciate you waking us, sounding the alarm. The book, ladies and gentlemen, is called The Confrontation. Walid Farah's an expert on the thoughts and the plans, excuse me, of the Islamic extremists. It's available in bookstores everywhere, and we appreciate Dr. Faraz being here with us today.